Say, do you know what you have here? This is something that's only been hinted at in antiquity. For the first time ever, we're laying eyes on the actual Gospel of Judas. Think about it. This was the only Jesus I ever saw when I was growing up. But it has troubled me as to why Western culture has taken hold of this portrait as though it was painted by Peter himself while Jesus posed for a long time. Several images of Jesus Christ have depicted him as light-skinned in almost every portrait. However, checking through the letter written by Lentulus to Caesar, he described Jesus in a very detailed way that might contradict the famous paintings of the Lord. Many suggest the letter was a fake, as Lentulus' existence was never mentioned anywhere in history. But if the criticism turns out to be false, what could have been his relationship with Jesus Christ, and how was he able to describe him so vividly, like one who dined with him daily? Join us in this video as we unravel the truths in the letter Lentulus addresses to Caesar. The letter to Caesar in the 20th century. One of the earliest depictions of Jesus was the Divine Mercy image, which was popular among Roman Catholics and Anglicans. The pattern of the image is said to have been miraculously shown to Saint Faustina Kowalska in a vision of Jesus in 1931 in Poland. Faustina wrote in her diary that Jesus appeared to her and asked her to paint an image according to the pattern she saw. Faustina eventually found an artist named Eugene Kazimierowski to depict the Divine Mercy image of Jesus with his right hand raised in a sign of blessing and the left hand touching the garment near his breast, with two large rays, one red and the other white, emanating from near his heart. These rays indicate that the image represents the graces of divine mercy poured out upon the world, especially through baptism and the Eucharist. Many different versions of this image have been painted, but Jesus made it clear in the vision to Faustina that the painting itself is not what is important. When Saint Faustina first saw the original image that was being painted under her direction, she was disappointed and complained to Jesus, "Who will paint you as beautiful as you are?" In answer, she heard these words, "Not in the beauty of the color nor of the brush lies the greatness of this image, but in my grace." Another significant painting of Jesus was The Head of Christ by Warner Salmon, where he portrays Jesus from his head to chest region, with his gaze fixed in a direction. Salmon stated that the head of Christ was the result of a miraculous vision he received late one night, proclaiming that the answer came at 2 a.m. in January 1924. The head of Christ is venerated in the Coptic Orthodox Church after 12-year-old Isaac A., who was diagnosed with cancer, saw the eyes of Jesus in the painting shedding tears. Father Isaac Solomon of St. Mark's Coptic Church in Houston testified to the miracles on the same day, and on the next day, Dr. R.F. Riscala, the family physician, examined the youth and certified that there were no traces of leukemia. Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci was also among the earliest paintings of Jesus. It portrayed Jesus in a blue Renaissance dress, making the sign of the cross with his right hand while holding a transparent crystal orb in his left. The image served as a vehicle for spiritual communication between the spectator and the likeness of Christ. Clearly, we find that the inspiration behind earlier representations of Jesus were visions and revelations as he revealed himself to them. However, in the letter of Lentulus to Caesar, his description of Jesus is not based on either of these. Rather, it seemed as though he walked and moved with Jesus every day while he was on earth. It was not recorded that Lentulus was a disciple of Jesus, so what kind of relationship did they have? What you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Lentulus was a governor of Judea before Pontius Pilate, who wrote a letter that gives a vivid description of Jesus. The letter of Lentulus is an epistle of mysterious origin that was widely published in the 15th century. The letter greatly influenced how Jesus was later physically depicted in art. Christopher Millis, the 18th century librarian of Genoa, stated the letter was written in golden letters on red paper and richly bound but lost. A 19th century scholar believed he could trace the letter down to the time of Diocletian, but this is generally not accepted by present-day scholars. Different manuscripts of the letter have been printed, and it was used by Ludolf in his own writings on the life of Christ. The next printed manuscript of the letter was in the works of Saint Anselm, but it was neither their work. According to the manuscripts, a certain Jacopo Colonna found the letter in 1432 in an ancient Roman document sent to Rome from Constantinople. The description of the letter agrees with the portrait of Jesus Christ drawn by Nepos and St. John of Damascene. The proof that it is authentic lies in several facts that form its basis. But what did the letter contain? In the letter, Lentulus describes Jesus as a man of great power and virtue. Some people refer to him as the prophet of truth, while his disciples address him as the Son of God. Lentulus portrays Jesus as a man of medium size with a venerable aspect. He compares the color of his hair to that of ripe hazelnut, wavy and curly, about the length of his shoulder. It is parted at the tops of his head after the pattern of the Nazarene. His face is cheerful without any wrinkles or spots, while his brows are smooth. According to his description, he has a quiet beard, and his eyes are blue-gray and bright. His stature is straight, and his arms and hands are beautiful to behold. He is terrible in his reprimands, sweet and amiable in his admonitions, cheerful without loss of gravity. He was never known to laugh, but often to weep, and was considered the most beautiful among the children of men. To determine the authenticity of this letter, we must first compare it to the scriptures within the Bible. The statement that describes him as a person of venerable aspect, who can be both feared and loved, aligns with Proverbs 1 verse 7 in the Bible, which says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. His disciples understood him as one who shows love and justice and follows his Father's will to the core. The letter also depicts his hair as long, which is controversial. However, recall that he was a Nazarene, and it was their sworn oath to never shave off their hair. The letter also states that Jesus was terrible in his reprimands, aligning with Proverbs 3 verse 12, which says, "For whom the Lord loveth he correcteth." The statement he was never known to laugh, but often to weep, supports Hebrews 4 verse 15, which says he was touched with the feeling of our infirmities, and in all points tempted like we are. Jesus was known for praying for the need to let the cup of his death pass over him, yet he remained committed to fulfilling the Father's will. One last controversial statement in Lentulus' letter described Jesus as the most beautiful among the children of men. However, Isaiah 53 verse 2 states, "He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him." Many scholars suggest that this discrepancy could stem from different people's spiritual understanding of Jesus. Other important arguments in favor of the letter's authenticity have been considered. Scholars have stressed that the letter must be apocryphal, similar to other biblical works like the Epistle of Barnabas or the Shepherd of Hermes. Additionally, the 15th century manuscripts make no mention of Pus. Lentulus, as the governor of Judea, suggests that this title may have been introduced from other sources. Our Lentulus may have been a Roman official visiting Judea at the time, and Roman history mentions several individuals from the Lent family active around the period of Jesus' ministry. Given that Roman officials could address letters to the Senate, the authenticity of Lentulus' letter deserves deeper consideration. The letter of Lentulus provides a detailed description of Jesus based on biblical records, but there are other records outside of the Bible as well. For instance, King Abgar of Edessa, one of the first Christian kings, is said to have written to Jesus, calling him the good physician and asking him to heal his disease. Although some claim that Jesus healed Abgar, Jesus' response to the letter indicates that he did not personally visit him but would send a disciple in his place. This account aligns with Lentulus' description of Jesus healing infirmities. In another letter, Pontius Pilate writes to Tiberius Caesar, describing Jesus as strict, pious, and an ambassador of truth, which also supports Lentulus' portrayal of Jesus as the prophet of truth and one who was stern in his reprimands. These letters correspond with the descriptions in Lentulus' letter, suggesting that Lentulus indeed saw Jesus. However, do these descriptions align with the physical images of Jesus created by early Christian artists? Early works of art attempted to depict Jesus, even though such portrayals were initially discouraged. As Christianity evolved after the New Testament era, much of its teachings and representations, including the imagery of Jesus, began to change from how the early church in the Book of Acts described it. The earliest surviving images of Jesus have been dated to around AD 240 to 256. A small group of faithful Christians continued, but much of Christianity gradually evolved into a religion that bore little resemblance to the church described in the Book of Acts. The earliest images that have been uncovered, supposedly portraying Jesus, date from around AD 240 to 256. These artists, living about 200 years after Christ's ascension, had never seen him or known any of his contemporaries. Instead of trying to directly portray him, these early images symbolically represented Christ, most commonly as the Good Shepherd holding a lamb. In these depictions, Jesus is portrayed as young, physically fit, and beardless. Many of these images were found in catacombs in Rome rather than in Judea or Asia Minor, where most early Christians lived. Historians face challenges in positively identifying these images as Christ because they resemble pagan art, or a shepherd symbolized philanthropy. Borrowing from pagan art is a common theme in many familiar icons of Christianity. It wasn't until after Constantine that detailed artistic representations of Jesus began to appear in churches. Historians note that there was resistance to artistic portrayals of Jesus. However, after Constantine accepted Christianity and started reshaping it in the Roman image, Greco-Roman customs of worshiping deities through statues and images became integrated into Christianity. By the end of the 4th century, the use of images in churches became widespread. People began to prostrate themselves before these images, with some ignorant enough to worship them. Defenders of the practice claimed that they were merely showing reverence to the symbols of an absent Lord and his saints. Although resistance persisted, the use of icons and images became deeply entrenched in Christianity, especially in Rome and Byzantium. Nonetheless, art played a role in shaping people's imagination of Jesus' physical appearance, complementing the biblical descriptions and giving believers a better understanding of what God in the flesh might have looked like. The development of Christian artwork did not happen in isolation. An image believed to be Jesus' face was once found imprinted on a piece of cloth, which stunned historians. This relic, known as the Shroud of Turin or the Veil of Veronica, was discovered in 1354 and bears the image of a man who historians believe to be Christ. The Shroud of Turin is a length of linen cloth that displays the faint image of a crucified man. It has been venerated for centuries, particularly by Catholics, as the actual burial shroud used to wrap Jesus' body after the crucifixion. The image on the shroud is thought to have been miraculously imprinted. The shroud, dated to the 14th century, has become a symbol for many Christians, even though it continues to spark debate over its authenticity. The image on the cloth appears to depict a man with a beard, mustache, and shoulder-length hair parted in the middle, similar to the description in Lentulus's letter. He is muscular and tall, with various experts estimating his height between 1.70 and 1.88 meters, 5 feet 7 inches to 6 feet 2 inches. Reddish-brown stains on the cloth correlate with the wounds described in the biblical account of Jesus' crucifixion. Over time, the controversy surrounding the Shroud of Turin has waned, and it is now revered as a holy relic. However, some continue to rely solely on the Bible for their understanding of Jesus' appearance, considering it the truest source. The Bible provides limited information about Jesus' physical appearance, and much of what we think about his looks has been shaped by cultural and historical interpretations. Contrary to the popular Western image of Jesus as a fair-skinned, light-haired, blue-eyed man, the Bible gives no explicit description of his features. The most common depictions come from Western art, which has been influenced by representations of Greek and Roman gods like Zeus. Starting from the 4th century, Jesus was a Jewish man from Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth during the 1st century, which strongly suggests that he would have looked like a typical Middle Eastern man of his time. He was about 30 years old when he began his ministry, Luke 3 verse 23. In Matthew 26 verses 46 to 56, Judas Iscariot had to point Jesus out to the soldiers because he blended in with his disciples, indicating that his appearance was not extraordinary or particularly distinctive. There are passages in the Bible that some scholars believe provide subtle clues about Jesus' appearance. For instance, Revelation 1 verses 14 to 15 describes his hair as white like wool and his feet as like burnished bronze, suggesting darker skin. Additionally, early artistic depictions, such as a 6th century portrait found in Israel, showed Jesus with short, curly hair, which was common in Eastern Byzantine art. In contrast, Jesus' long-haired, bearded image in Western art was heavily influenced by depictions of Greek and Roman gods. After Constantine's conversion to Christianity, Jesus began to be represented with features similar to Zeus, often shown in long robes and surrounded by a halo. A more recent and possibly accurate depiction of Jesus came from a 2001 forensic reconstruction based on a 1st-century Israeli skull. This image portrayed him with olive brown skin, dark brown or black hair, and brown eyes, traits typical of people from Judea and Egypt at the time. He was estimated to have stood around 5 feet 5 inches, 166 centimeters, which was the average height for men in that era. Despite these efforts, there remains no definitive answer to what Jesus looked like. Cultures around the world have visualized him in different ways, often reflecting their own racial or ethnic characteristics. In Western culture, one of the most famous depictions is the head of Christ by Warner Sallman, showing him as a white man with light features. However, many argue that this portrayal is historically inaccurate. In the end, Jesus' physical appearance is a mystery. Some believers point to scriptures like Psalm 45 verse 2, which calls him the fairest of the children of men, and Revelation 1 verses 14 to 15, which describes him with symbolic imagery. What is clear is that his true glory, as many Christians believe, will only be revealed when he comes again. So, while we can speculate and study, no earthly image can fully capture his divine nature.